This video contains content that some might find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised. Do you remember what it's like to have an imaginary friend? Were they kind, playful? Maybe they were energetic or unpredictable. Having an imaginary friend is a natural part of brain development, and they can be a great source of comfort for a young child. But how long could that friendship actually last? Tonight, our narrator shares a chilling story about his son's newfound friend. I'm Ryan Bergara, and this is Are You Scared? A show where I tell my friend Shane Madej the internet's scariest stories. So lock your doors, turn off the lights, and let's see if we can make it till the end of the night. Imaginary friend. Apparently, there is a science behind the childhood phenomena of the imaginary friend. Psychologists note that it's natural, a sign of intelligence, attempting to stimulate social skills, or just simply an innocent game of play pretend.
I disagree.
Yeah.
We're two of the smartest guys who ever lived, and we ain't had no imaginary friends when we were growing up.
It sounds like these doctors were huge nerds.
Yeah.
They just needed to cover it up.
Yeah, they wanted to just comfort themselves.
Yeah,
and
oh
make
no, it's a
themselves
sign of enormous intelligence.
If you did have an imaginary friend growing up, what would you be looking for?
I don't know why. I'd want it to be like a really muscular clown.
Did not expect you to say those words.
I don't know, just like a fucking, just like jacked clown.
I like that. I think my imaginary friend would be a real little guy who sits on my shoulder and says stuff like, yeah, do that, you know?
You mean like the devil and the angel kind of scenario? Like
Yeah,
Kronk
but
from
yes,
Emperor's
yes,
New
yes,
Groove?
but no angel, just one devil on my shoulder.
Is he also doing one-armed push-ups?
Oh yeah, up here, he's just doing push-ups, and he's like, smoke cigarettes.
Really though, most scientists seem to gravitate towards explaining these friends as the telltale sign of a child grasping for autonomy, someone they own all to themselves, that they have control over. Well, let me tell you, I don't feel in control.
Oh, fuck.
That's my morning mantra.
When you wake up in the morning, that's the first thing you say?
Let me tell you, I don't feel in control.
Another day, another white knuckle ride through this thing we call life.
All right, I'll see you in the end, brother. A month ago, my mother's dementia had worsened to the point of needing to live in a care facility, which meant my 7-year-old Oscar and I moved into my childhood home. I had mixed feelings about it. My mom wasn't the most supportive of mothers growing up, and my memories of the house aren't particularly warm and fuzzy. They mostly consist of me sitting in the living room, watching the neighbors' kids play in the street through the windows while I chatter away to the only things that would listen to me, my toys.
I talk to my toys. You talk to your toys?
Yeah, but I was just kind of playing. I didn't think of
You're
them as
playing.
like fully, you know.
Yeah, I wasn't like, what do you think we're gonna have for
beings.
lunch today? I had wonderful teddy bears who I talked to.
Yeah.
But again,
what did you tell them?
they were like going on adventures, you know? They
Yeah.
were doing Goonie stuff. You know, I wasn't like, do you think I'm funny? You know?
It prepared you for the future response to that question.
Oh, you piece of shit.
I'm a decently adjusted adult, not particularly bitter about my lonely childhood. But remembering details about the house still made me tense up. How it wore its shadows like a thick layer of dust, or the way the doors drifted on their hinges and never quite closed properly, so that from the end of the downstairs hallway, the living room always looked like someone was inside, inviting you to join them with a propped open door.
Spooky.
I used to have a little coat rack in my bedroom when I was a child.
And every time you saw it, did you go, ah!
Yeah, kinda. It kind of looked like a man standing in my corner.
And
'cause
you
there was a
never
hat
ever
on
got
top.
wise to that fact.
No, I think I was always aware of it, and every time I looked at it, I was like, I know that's a coat rack, but what if there was a guy?
What if there was a guy who
And
was a
he-
coat rack?
Not a coat rack, no.
Oh.
I mean, what if a guy got wise to the fact that I had found peace in knowing that it's a coat rack, and then I'm gonna stand here and pretend I'm a coat rack until he falls asleep?
Yeah.
This is what my mind started to think of. And
Yeah.
then once I was asleep, he would,
He'd do a Pennywise run at you.
and then he would, no, he would just kill me.
Oh, he'd just kill you.
He'd just kill me, yeah. Other than my own trepidation, everything else went pretty smoothly. However, as I stepped into the house again for the first time in over a decade, I felt a brief chill, like someone exhaling onto the back of my neck. "Daddy, look!" The excitable shriek of my son from the living room tore me from my thoughts, and I shifted my eyes to peer through the door swaying in front of me. In the still-furnished room, placed around the glass coffee table that had discolored into a foggy yellow from years of cigarette smoke, was a circle of toys. But not just any toys. All my favorites from childhood. There was Mr. Jingles, the mouse, propped stiffly on his back legs. That's a funny name.
I'm so excited to hear this roster.
I know.
Off to a great start with Mr. Jingles.
Mr. Jingles.
Because you said Mr. Jingles, and I was like, now what is Mr. Jingles?
And you know what? Mr. Jingles is a good name for like a horror character because it's cute and funny. I could also see that being terrifying. At the mercy of a thin film of dust, Harriet the donkey had turned a much lighter, duller shade of gray, and my old He-Man figurine sat uncomfortably, his plastic arms bent in a way that made them look horribly broken. On the coffee table itself sat my old Ladybug tea set. Nothing about these things should have been frightening, but there was a quiet uneasiness in the sagging joints and moth-eaten ears of the playthings once so full of life to me. I felt what I can only describe as the opposite of nostalgia, as if, instead of me longing for the past had been longing for me, for quite some time, and now that it had me, I was to be punished for my absence. Oh shit, this is like fucked up Toy Story. Like if the toys got angry at Andy for not playing with them.
It's like Sid's toys.
Well,
Sid's toys were a pretty fucked crew.
Not really, it's just Sid messed with them.
Yeah, they didn't like it.
This is more like Small Soldiers.
Oh, Tommy Lee
shit.
Jones.
Is this gonna turn into Small Soldiers? I bet you that donkey will be fucked up. And the little mouse, Mr. Jingles, he's probably a little son of a bitch too. Going over there when you're sleeping, shoving peanuts up your nose, lodging them in your brain, watching your eyes bleed, laughing.
This is really scary.
Looks like you're going nuts.
You gotta pitch this to Blumhouse.
I could have pushed away this feeling as my own overactive imagination, but these toys were set out in the exact same way I would arrange them every single day as a child, unless they had been sitting here untouched for 20 years. I couldn't come up with a logical explanation to what I was looking at. I mean, even I would be like, maybe your kid did it. He's 7. He's
also,
your kid.
You remember exactly how you...
Well, if it's a circle. Also, that's not another thing. You're not reinventing the wheel. It's not like you had the toys arranged in like the configuration of the stars in the American flag. It's like, it's a fucking circle.
Toys in a circle, that's classic.
Yeah.
Like they're doing a little sacrifice or something.
Where'd you find this stuff, buddy? I asked, lightly hoping Oscar didn't discern any fear from my voice. It was just there. Inwardly, I cringed at how easily Oscar grabbed at Mr. Jingles to inspect his worn felt hat, as if I worried its dilapidated state was somehow infectious. He told me they hadn't had a bite to eat for years and that they're very hungry. Very hungry. That's why they're having a tea party. Don't they look hungry, Daddy? Mentally, I kicked myself for thinking that the words of a 7-year-old would do anything to ease my mind. As I looked closer at the toys, however, I realized he was right. They did look very hungry. Mr. Jingles was sitting there like...
I don't know.
I was gonna say, if you look at an action figure long enough, I suppose you could transpose an emotion onto it.
I don't know. He thinks the toys look hungry.
Any thought about my old dolls soon evaporated in the stress of moving in. It turns out that fitting a new dishwasher or grouting the window frames against the relentless mid-February British drizzle is an incredible tonic for disquietude. In fact, I didn't even see those toys again until I had sorted Oscar's bedroom, the downstairs spare right across the hall from the living room.
This story became so English so quickly. Oh, good Lord.
I know. The British drizzle, incredible tonic for disquietude. This would actually cause the first proper argument with my son I could remember. In the days we'd been in this house, Oscar had grown rather attached to my old toys, and I often heard him giggling to himself while he hosted tea parties. This in and itself wasn't a problem. After all, I'd conducted plenty of pretend tea ceremonies in my day. But in Oscar, it became almost obsessive. Oscar had always been mild, good-natured, but these days I noticed a flicker of near resentment in his expression whenever I told him it was bedtime and time to say goodnight to the toys. Maybe it was nothing. Children can get stroppy, especially during a big life change like a move. But the anger in his little voice felt a little too cold for a child. At night, I would hear the pattering of feet or the low groan of the living room's door's hinges. But whenever I made my way down the stairs to try and catch him out of bed, Oscar would be back in his room, fast asleep.
I like it. Toys are alive.
What's going on with Oscar? Are they filling his head with naughty thoughts?
I bet they're whispering to him, yeah. Kill your father, kill your father, kill your father.
Yeah, what do you think Oscar was saying that made his dog?
He's probably saying, okay, okay, okay.
Well, to his dad, because his dad's alarmed. Was he like, I wanna fucking kill you? Oscar, tea time is over. No, it's not, bitch.
Mr. Jingle says you're an asshole.
Mr. Jingle says I could take you.
Mr. Jingle says no wonder Mom left you.
Dr. Donkey says you're a cuck.
Dr. Donkey.
Oscar would be back in his room, fast asleep, until I finally caught him. I woke up one night, and the air in the house was thick and humid. I got up to open some windows, and when I got to the one on the landing, a glance into the gloom of the downstairs hallway drew my attention to two things. The first was Oscar, sitting in the living room, engrossed in whispered conversation. The other thing I noticed, just beyond the door, was what I swore looked like a thin gray shadow stretched across the ground, seemingly cast by nothing. The stairwell creaked beneath me, and by the time I got to the bottom of the stairs, Oscar's head had whipped around. Os? I croaked, trying and failing for an authoritative tone. What are you still doing up? Playing. He said it such a flat tone that I half expected him to follow it up with, you fucking idiot. I looked where I'd seen the shadow, but now there was nothing. It's 4 a.m, Os. We talked about. I'm going, he muttered, pushing past me in a way that would have earned a timeout had I not been so shaken. Danny is way more fun than you anyway. My blood ran cold. Danny. I never heard Oscar mention any Danny before, and I would have remembered. Danny was my childhood best friend. Not only that, but nobody else knew about Danny because, well, he was imaginary.
Oh, shit.
Are we purchasing 2 tickets to Ghost Town?
Yeah, I know Danny's probably not a great dude. The name Danny just conjures up a guy being like, what's up, guys? You wanna play with some toys? Don't listen to your dad.
Yeah.
It's nighttime, let's have fun.
Hey, Mr. Jingles is hungry, man. Feed him some peanuts. Danny and I would sit just like Oscar had, taking our tea in the living room. I'd imagined Danny to be around my age, always there when the house was a little too quiet, or when my mother forgot to make dinner, and we convinced ourselves that our pretend tea parties were as filling as a real meal. It sounds crazy, but the thought of him alone in the house, except for my mother, played on my mind well into my 20s. I marched back up the stairs to my room, struck by the coincidence that Oscar and I, presented with the same lonely house, chose the same name for our imaginary friends.
He needs to start grilling his son about Danny.
I'm actually legitimately curious. This is a serious question. If you had an imaginary friend, and the friend's name was Danny, and then you had a boy one day who had an imaginary friend also named Danny, what would be your reaction?
I'd be like, tell me about him, what's his deal? You know?
You wouldn't be freaked out a little bit.
I don't think so.
Not even a little bit? You wouldn't be like, huh, that's weird.
You know.
That's a little bit.
There's not that many names.
Yeah, there are. What are you fucking talking about?
Many names.
I don't know why I expected
had like 3 friends named Dan growing up. Don't even get me started on Brian's.
Yeah, there's sure a lot of Brian's.
There's too many Brian's.
The next day, I decided to swap mine and Oscar's bedrooms. I'd noticed Oscar's eyes were starting to develop dark circles beneath them. And after the previous night, I understood why. If he slept upstairs and I slept downstairs, he wouldn't be able to sneak off in the middle of the night to have imaginary tea parties. Oscar complained, but this way I'd more easily know if he was up and moving around.
What the fuck is this dad doing?
Okay, buddy, I'm gonna sleep in the race car bed tonight, and you're gonna sleep in Daddy's bed, just because I feel like we'll be safer this way.
I feel pretty emasculated right now because I can't control you. I'm gonna go sleep in your little teeny tiny bed, and you sleep in my giant one.
How do I turn on Lightning McQueen's little eyes here? Ka-chow? Is that what I say? Okay. It's presented in a way that like that's logically the next step.
But I'm just gonna guess that Danny and Oscar are just gonna be like jumping on the bed eating popcorn.
That first night of me sleeping downstairs, I awoke around midnight to the sound of pattering feet. Groggily, I sat up, preparing to chastise my son, and threw open my door. Nothing. Just a stale draft seeping from the living room into the hall. I blinked and peered into the living room. Aha, maybe Oscar wasn't there, but he was as good as caught. He'd set up Mr. Jingles and crew into their tea party arrangement. Even if he wasn't here now, Oscar was just here.
This guy's so fucking stupid. Aha! This is what my boy's done. He hasn't solved anything.
Just picturing a neighbor looking through his living room window, just this grown man at 2 o'clock in the morning, like, aha! Mr. Jingles, I knew it was you. Just playing with all these things at a tea party.
I finally outsmarted my son!
Since I didn't catch him in the act, I decided I wouldn't talk to him about yet again disobeying me until the morning. I put the toys back in their bin and shuffled back to my room. As I laid back into bed, faintly, barely audible, I thought I heard a hoarse, faraway voice, as though through a staticky television. You just sleep now. I was exhausted from the week of moving, and I figured the voice was my brain sliding into the twilight of sleep. Right before I lost consciousness, the last thing I remember hearing was, I'll be here. Oh, I can't tell you how good it is to see you.
It's a lot to just hear, you know, and be like, yeah, that's probably nothing.
The next morning, I awoke, unsettled. The first order of business was making sure Oscar stopped trying to have his midnight tea parties. Oscar regarded me balefully as I carted Mr. Jingles and company in boxes up to the attic. Then, he refused to talk to me to or from school. That night, I had a hard time falling asleep. All night, I tossed and turned. But then, around sunrise, the sound of shuffling filtered across the hall. I quietly opened my door and stepped across the hall and found the boxes open, the tea party set out exactly as it had the day we moved in. I almost lost it. I wanted to yell at Oscar, to drag him downstairs and make him clean up what he'd done. But across the living room, something caught my eye. Against the wall that's always held a big, dusty mirror, I saw a shadow almost crawl along the wallpaper. When it got to the mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself, looking exhausted and slightly confused. Then, my reflection started to be interrupted, like there was now a film running down the mirror. And in that film, I saw him, Danny.
Danny!
Hey, what's up, dude?
Hey, what's going on? Been a while.
Wow, you grown up too. Want to grab a beer? And now
he's a little more mature.
And now they could just bro down.
Yeah.
Talk about their lives.
Let's go to Buffalo Wild Wings.
Yeah, my wife left me.
Yeah, me too. Life is hard. Yeah. Your boy is great.
In the time I had grown up, seemingly so had he. But that was where the similarities ended. He was thin, and not just thin, emaciated. His skin stretched tightly over a sallow, angular face and almost disappeared into the dark spaces beneath where his ribs jutted out. The lack of fat around his cheeks created deep, dark, sunken pits, wherein his eyes bulged outward like wreckage floating in an oil spill. I was reminded of the cold, dead gaze of a shark. Worst of all was his mouth, forced into a wide, red-lipped smile, as though drawn on crudely by a child.
Sounds like a pretty rough adulthood, honestly. He's got his noodles, no meat on him.
Yeah.
Sunken face. Not great.
To the point where even asking him, how have you been, would be insulting.
Unless like this is thriving for a ghoul like him.
Oh,
He's like,
yeah.
Well, clearly things are going pretty well for me. I get a lot of work these days.
Yeah. Get a lot of work haunted homes. When he saw me looking, that smile split open. And as he laughed, still silent, I'm sure his jaw dislocated. His movement was slow, but purposeful, ambling in that stumbling, swaying way that a harvestman spider crawls on its spindly, brittle legs. He regarded me for a moment, overjoyed. A painfully bony hand pushed me back onto the pillow, and all I could do was whimper as it stroked through my hair, feeling like a cold, worn leather glove scratching at my scalp. "It's so good of you to join us," he crowed, revealing dark, mottled gums as he grinned. "Come on, sit down, we're hungry." "This can't be real," I mumbled. You're imaginary." This was apparently the wrong thing to say.
Can't be saying that to people. You'll get canceled. You can't call people imaginary.
That's a good retort, because it's really hard to come back from that. Like, if I'm upset with somebody.
You're imaginary.
Well, you're imaginary.
I'd be like,
and then you look in your hand and it's like Back to the Future. I'm gonna try that the next time I have an argument. Danny was still smiling, but there was a glimmer of dark rage in his expression. "Well, that's not very nice," he chided, the thin hand moving over the reflection of Mr. Jingles. "I've been all alone, Oliver. Nobody to play tea parties with. You must be as hungry as we are." "Go away," I begged, watching his hand squeeze my old toy. "I'm not a kid anymore. I don't want to play with you. Leave me alone and leave Oscar alone." "Relax," he hissed. "Tell your friend Danny all about it." "I'm not your friend anymore." At those words, the reflection of Danny started to shake. In his hand, in the reflection, and somehow in real life, fluff started to burst from Mr. Jingles' seams, as Danny seemed to grow angrier. Danny's reflection seemed to consider the fluff in his hands, right as I heard from upstairs a, "Dad?" It was Oscar. My eyes grew wide as Danny looked up at the ceiling, a sinister smile spreading across his gaunt face. Suddenly, he slid out of the mirror, heading straight up towards the second floor. I spun on my heels and sprinted up the stairs. At the first landing, I slipped and smashed my jaw against the wall.
Never good when they start crawling out of the mirror.
Speaking from personal experience there?
Yes, you know, on our ghost hunts, we get them crawling out the mirrors all the time. We don't put it on camera, but
The best thing to do about that is you just put a mirror in front of the mirror and then they crawl right back into another mirror.
yeah, they sort of get stuck in a little loop.
Like Mario.
And they pick up speed, and they just go mirror to mirror to mirror to mirror, and they just go,
Yeah.
and eventually just explode in a ball of light. This is something that we know as ghost hunters. It's one of our tried and true methods. It's
Yeah.
a great way to trap a ghost, 2 mirrors.
Oscar's voice pulled me the rest of the way upstairs. I burst in his room to see a long, thin shadow seeping down the wall, right towards Oscar's head. Without thinking, I grabbed Oscar and ran downstairs. We jumped in the car and started driving. I swore in my rearview mirror I saw the house itself shake in rage as we sped down the street. Oscar huddled in the passenger seat, trembling. I don't think this is gonna happen, but I fucking hope Mr. Jingle somehow snuck into the car
Oh, or he's on the roof
and pops out of like the center console with like a little knife.
with a little knife or a gun.
Yeah, little
A little knife or a big gun. It's just a little mouse with just a 9mm.
Pops out of the console. I hate to do this. I pointed the car in the only direction I could think of, towards my mother in her care facility. Being close to psychological professionals felt like a good idea at the moment. When we got there, my mom had just finished breakfast. Oscar played quietly on a tablet while I sat across from my mother, the woman who had given me so little comfort my entire life, hoping for an ounce of reassurance, a hint that I wasn't going mad like her. She stared straight through me at Oscar while I talked. Her eyes were filled not with love for her grandchild, but something sinister, like Oscar was standing in her way. After what felt like an eternity, my mother said the first words I'd heard from her since going into the facility. "Shouldn't you two be getting back? Danny doesn't like to be alone for long." So, are you scared? Imaginary friend. This is actually a story about an imaginary enemy.
Oh, that's really good. Yes, that's true.
Have you ever had an imaginary enemy? Or was that just your reflection?
I don't hate myself as much as you do, so
He's
So
right.
I see myself in the mirror, I'm like, hey, good to see you, pal.
All right, well, that story was submitted to us by Freya Richardson. Thank you for that lovely little yarn. That was quite fun. What if my imaginary friend was you?
Oh, interesting. Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Ryan, I'm real, I think.
I made my friend disappear. I made my friend disappear! Yeah!